On this edition of Early Look, we got a good one here. It's going to be the women's bantamweight title fight as the co-main event of UFC 324. My name is James Lynch. I'm going to go through a bunch of different stuff, and then I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight at the end. Let me know your prediction in the comments. Would love to hear from you after you're done watching today's video. And like I always do on this show, we're going to do a quick tail of the tape between these two women here. Kayla Harrison, 19-1 record. Amanda Nunes, 23-5, 35 years old to 37. So not a big age gap here. That's something I think people forget. 5'8" apiece, 66 to 69. So physically very similar. Age-wise, not a huge gap there. And experience-wise, I mean, Amanda has more fights and has fought some better opposition. But this is a really exciting fight in the women's bantamweight division. Looking forward to this one. Let's start first with the current champion, Kayla Harrison, and talk about all her great accolades. Again, 5-round fight, co-main event, UFC 324, part of the Paramount era. Looking forward to this one. And this fight, by the way, going down at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. So I mentioned it there. Kayla Harrison, 19-1. She's got 6 knockouts, 8 submissions, and 5 decisions. 35 years old, 5'8" with a 66-inch reach. So she's 2 years younger than Amanda Nunes. She won gold medals for judo at the Olympic Games in 2012 and 2016. She was the former PFL women's lightweight champion. So that's lightweight, which is 155, not even 145. That's 2 weight classes above. So that happened in 2019 and in 2021. 2-division champion there. Or, well, not 2-division. 2 years she won. She won the 2019 tournament in 2021. She's the current UFC women's bantamweight champion. She got performance of the night 1 time in her last fight, and that was against Juliana Pena. Did not have an amateur debut. Obviously came from her judo background. Made her pro debut for PFL in 2018, June of 2021. Check this out. By the time Kayla Harrison made her professional MMA debut, Amanda Nunes had 24 career fights at that point. That's pretty crazy. Now, granted, again, Kayla, the judo career, can't look past that. That's, it's not like she was sitting on the couch while Amanda Nunes was fighting. Again, 24 career fights there for Nunes. And then by the time that Kayla Harrison made her UFC debut, which was only in April of 2024, not that long ago. That was the fight against Holly Holm. By then, Nunes had 17 UFC fights. So that's not even including the overall fight she had. She had 17 fights in the UFC. So just to show you the experience gap in terms of who Amanda's fought, how long she's been in the UFC, that certainly outweighs what Kayla Harrison's done. Kayla Harrison is, as you can see there, 3-0 in the UFC. She's got 2 stoppage wins. Her notable wins, I'm going to include one from PFL. I think this win over Aspen Ladd was pretty good. Aspen Ladd at one point when she was in the UFC was ranked at women's bantamweight. So we'll add that win in there. That was a win. Although I heard from her coach and some other people that I think Ladd had some health issues going into this fight. But again, a win's a win. Got to give it to her for that win. And then obviously the Holly Holm win as well was that was her debut. Gets a 2nd round finish there. Very impressive. The Ketlen Vieira fight wins a decision there. And then Juliana Pena. So all 3 of her wins are notable in the UFC. And if we want to count a 4th one, like I said, you could talk about the Aspen Ladd win. Her only loss, it's outside the UFC, was the Larissa Pacheco fight. That was a fight where, again, pretty big upset there. Kayla Harrison was a pretty big favorite, minus 700, so plus 500. Larissa Pacheco gets the win over Kayla Harrison, and that was back in November of 2022. Because Kayla hasn't been in the UFC that long, she hasn't had any crazy layoffs. She hasn't had any major injuries or anything along those lines. She also hasn't had any close fights in the UFC either, right? The Ketlen Vieira fight, pretty decisive there. Let's look at her stats. Again, these are going to be a bit higher, especially with the fact that she's only got the 3 fights. So Kayla Harrison's stats, significant strikes landed per minute is 4.29. Her striking accuracy is at 62%. His strikes landed per minute is 1.110. Her striking defense is at 66%. Doesn't get hit that much. Takedown average is 2.84. Her takedown accuracy is at 37%. Her takedown defense is 100%. And her sub average is 0.9. Again, don't have a huge sample size of Kayla Harrison in the UFC. We could go over some of the stuff she's done outside, but just wanted to focus on that for this breakdown. So that's pretty much everything you need to know about the current women's bantamweight champion. Now let's talk about the former champion, Amanda Nunes, the Lioness, and dig into all of her stats here ahead of this matchup. So you can see there, 23-5 record. She's got 13 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 6 decisions. Mention it there. Former UFC bantamweight champion. She's also the former UFC featherweight champion as well. She's 37 years old, 5'8" with a 69-inch reach. So the only advantage she'll have here is that she's got a 1-inch reach advantage. She's already in the UFC Hall of Fame, made the class of 2025. She's a 2-time women's bantamweight champion. She's had 6 successful title defenses overall. She had 5 successful title defenses in her first reign, 1 successful title defense in her second reign. She is tied with Valentina Shevchenko for most wins in UFC title fights amongst women at 11. She's also the first woman in UFC history to win 2 titles at bantamweight and featherweight, and also to hold them simultaneously. Mention it there. Got the women's featherweight title by defeating Chris Cyborg a couple years back. She's got 5 performance of the night bonuses. Sarah McMahon, Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, Chris Cyborg, and Holly Holm. Amanda Nunes also never had an amateur debut, went straight to the pros back in March of 2008 and ended up losing her first fight actually against a girl by the name of Anna Maria. Did not make her debut until her UFC debut until August of 2013, which was a long time ago. So it's pretty crazy there. And I talked about the experience gap there as well. Amanda Nunes is 16-2 in the UFC. She's got 10 finishes. Some notable wins in her career include, she's 10-2 because Zingano and Pena were only losses. I had to double check that. 16-2 in the UFC, 10 finishes. She's got a lot of notable wins. Let's go through some of them right now. She's got 2 wins over Germaine Durandamy. She's got a win over Sarah McMahon, who's a former title challenger. Valentina Shevchenko's got 2 wins over her, although that second one quite close. Talk about that in a sec. Miesha Tate, Ronda Rousey, Raquel Pennington, Chris Cyborg, Holly Holm, Juliana Pena, and Irene Aldana. Her only losses were to Kat Zingano, which was a loss way back in 2014. And then obviously the huge upset loss to Juliana Pena back in December of 2021, where Nunes was a minus 1125 favorite and ended up getting choked out in the second round. Let's talk about her layoff, but I should point out prior to this layoff, because of course Nunes retired and she's coming out of retirement for this fight. If you look at her career dating back to 2013, Nunes is pretty active. She was fighting almost 2 times a year, sometimes 3 times a year. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind, very active throughout her career. Saying that though, we'll go through some of the layoffs she's had since 2013. So going from Ronda Rousey to Valentina Shevchenko, there was a 253-day layoff. Now, they were supposed to fight sooner than that. Remember, she had that illness on the UFC 213 card, so that took her out of that fight. So she was supposed to fight earlier. Just one thing to point out there. Going from Felicia Spencer to Megan Anderson, there was a 273-day layoff, and I believe the first Anderson fight, she withdrew for some reason. I don't remember why. That was back in 2020. Going from the second Pena fight to Irene Aldana, there was a 315-day layoff. So that's the second longest layoff of her career. But going into this fight, it will be 959 days that Amanda Nunes last fought. That was UFC 289 in Vancouver. I was at that card. Of course, I live in Vancouver in June of 2023. So longest layoff of her career coming into this fight. It is a big thing to note going into this one. That's a very long time to be off. Okay, the one close fight I mentioned with Nunes, we'll just mention it just because it is part of her career, is the Valentina Shevchenko fight. And that was at UFC 215. And that was in Edmonton. That was the second Shevchenko fight. She won by split decision in that one. First fight, she clearly won. You look at the scorecards here. Only 2 media members scored the fight a draw. We had 10 media members scored it for Nunes, 10 media members scoring it for Shevchenko. So that's a fight. And maybe in the future we'll get this one. I don't know. But that's a fight that was very close in that one. That was back in 2017. Just wanted to point that out when you're looking at Nunes' record, because that could have been another loss for her. You never know. All right, let's get to Nunes' stats. Strikes landed per minute, 4.55. So that's a little bit lower. Oh, no, that's still higher than Kayla Harrison. Striking accuracy is 51%. Strikes landed per minute, 2.62. Striking defense is 57%. She gets hit a little bit, but Kayla Harrison's she's at 66. But again, Nunes way more fights. Takedown average 2.73. Takedown accuracy is 54%. Here's a key stat here. Takedown defense, 82%. That could play a role in this fight, as you know, I'm sure Kayla would like to get this to the ground. Although Kayla quite capable in the stand-up as well. But that's a pretty high takedown defense. A lot of girls are not able to take down Amanda Nunes. So something to keep in mind a little bit later when we're talking about this one. Let's get to the odds. You know it's a good fight when the odds are close here. Kayla Harrison, almost a 2-1 favorite, is a 2-1 favorite on some of these books here, coming in at about minus 200. Amanda Nunes, plus 146, plus 160 around there on the betting odds. And then Tapology, similar story, although it does have more of a favor for Kayla Harrison. 75% of Kayla Harrison, people picking Kayla Harrison, with 50.4% by decision. 46.9% by submission, and then 2.7 by KO TKO. Amanda Nunes, 50% of people are picking Nunes by decision. They also have it 46.1 by KO or TKO. All right, let's get to my pick in this one. Drum roll, a little bit of a teaser there. I'm going with the underdog here. I'm going with Amanda Nunes. Now, hear me out. Hear me out before people are like, what are you talking about? Okay, so a couple things. Here's a key thing I think that is important in this fight. Kayla Harrison has only made 135 pounds once. That was her last fight against Juliana Pena. She can do it. We've seen her do it. But it is a process. It is a tough weight cut for her. We've heard her talk about in camp about how half the camp is her just getting down to the weight. That is a bit of a red flag, in my opinion, with her spending so much time in camp trying to get the weight down, running that much. She is very strong and very big. So that's something to keep in mind. And what do we know when people cut a lot of weight? Their chin's a little bit more susceptible to getting hit and getting knocked out. You can look at countless examples of fighters who fought in, lower weight classes and were getting knocked out. And a lot of that was the weight cut. That I'm not saying that will happen here, but it's one of those things to consider. By the way, I forgot to say, I'm going Nunes decision. Although I do think she could knock out Kayla as well, but I'm going Nunes decision. Another thing I think it's worth looking at in Kayla's career here, and I'm big on level of opposition. She hasn't really fought a striker to the caliber of Amanda Nunes. You could maybe say Holly Holm, but you're not fighting the prime Holly Holm. You're fighting the 42-year-old version of Holly Holm, right? So there's that. So if you look at some of these opponents here, Ketlin Vieira, Juliana Pena, more of a grappler, like you don't see a lot of like one-punch knockout fighters like Nunes is. Now, is that Nunes still around? Does she still exist with the amount of time she's been off? That's the big question. But like I said, I think with Harrison cutting so much weight, she's a little bit more compromised if the fight stays standing and Nunes is able to crack her. So something to keep in mind there. If you look at Nunes's wins, 56% of her wins are by KO, TKO. They're by knockout. So, a lot of people would lead to more of a knockout there. But if you look at the last couple fights, Pena, she wasn't able to knock out. Irene Aldana, she was not able to knock out. So that's something to keep in mind. And, I'm not saying it's easy to do that, but her last actual knockout win was the Holly Holm knockout win back in 2019. So it was a while ago. So I don't know if she'll do it. Again, it's 5 rounds. You would lean more towards a finish, but I don't know if Nunes will actually be able to knock her out in the 5 rounds. We'll see. I'm leaning more decision on that one. The other thing I don't think people are looking at, there's not a huge age gap here. I can understand if Harrison was like 25 or something. If she's like Dakota Devicha or something, for example, at 135 and she was younger and like we weren't seeing like a finished product yet, like I'd feel a little bit differently, but it's not a big age gap. Again, the issue here is that Nunes hasn't fought in so long. If Nunes had been active this whole time, I think Nunes is going to be the favorite in the fight, not Kayla Harrison. Because again, Harrison doesn't have that much experience in MMA. The other thing I mentioned there, Amanda Nunes' takedown defense. We saw it there. I'll mention it again. This is a big thing. 82% takedown defense. If Kayla can't get this to the ground, who do you think is the better striker? I think it's Amanda Nunes. And the proof is in the fact that Amanda Nunes, 13 wins by knockout. That's the most she has in her entire career. She's got good stand-up. And even if she can't knock out Kayla Harrison, I think those power shots could add up, especially with someone that's cutting a lot of weight. I don't like using this word, but I'm going to say it here as well. The Nunes' last loss, which I know people will point to, the Juliana Pena loss, tough loss there. That's about as close to a fluke loss as you'll get because she went out there and beat the brakes off Juliana Pena in that rematch, and it was a dominant performance. There's no questions asked that she beat her. I think Nunes had an off night in that Pena fights because I know some people will point to that. Yes, she's been defeated, but when is Amanda Nunes gassed out in the second round? There was some talk about her maybe having long COVID. It just looked like a weird fight for Nunes that night. So yes, she lost back in 2021 and it was one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. But I do think it's important to note that we have never seen Nunes look like that before. And, even then she dominated that first round of the fight. Like she got Pena on her back in that one. So yeah, I just, because people will point to that Nunes has been beat before, but it was kind of a fluke. And I hate using that because I don't want to disrespect Juliana Pena here, but I think 9 times out of 10, Nunes and Pena fight. I think Nunes wins that fight. It was just a weird fight. And again, I think it can't be stated just the experience gap, not only in overall fights with Kayla, having only 20 fights and Amanda Nunes having 28 fights. It's the opposition Nunes has fought. I went over the list there. You were talking about, Miesha Tate in her prime, Ronda Rousey. Like you look at some of the names she's fought and, Harrison, yeah, couple good wins here in the UFC, more in particular the Vieira and Pena fight. And maybe Aspenladd will give her that too. She also did beat Pacheco in the UFC, or who was in the UFC as well. We'll give her that. She had the 2 wins over Pacheco, but like, Brittany Elkin, Cotton, Morgan Fryer, like these aren't good wins. And again, you have to fight who you're supposed to. And Kayla should have been fighting those fighters as she was earlier in her career. But like, Kayla's fighting Brittany Elkin back at this time. Amanda Nunes is fighting like, Jeraine Durandamy during that time. You know what I mean? So there's a big gap in who they fought. I think that's super important. And then here's the most important thing. And this is more of an intangible thing that I'm going to bring up as well, that I think could play into this. What does Nunes have to gain coming back? She could have stayed retired, right? Like she could have, like her beating Harrison doesn't really add, let's say she goes out there and beats Kayla Harrison. Does it really add that much more to her legacy? She's still, had a 2-division champion, all that stuff. I think Nunes is trained. I mean, they have trained before. That's something I didn't even mention. I think Nunes knows something about Kayla where she really feels like she's better than her. And I think there's something to that. Like Harrison has all the upside here if she wins this fight. If Nunes wins, I don't really think it adds much to her legacy. I think Nunes, like, there's got to be something to that where Nunes is super confident because, like, she's not gaining a whole lot by beating Kayla. And I think there's something to that where Nunes really believes in her ability. You know, I don't think she's been sitting on the couch the last 959 days. I think she's been in there training. She's got her gym. It's not the same as competing, but I don't think Nunes will be like, you know, coming into this looking super rusty. Like, I don't think Nunes would take this unless she 100% knew that she's going to be at her best. And I really think there's something to that. I think that's something that is overlooked in this fight, is that Nunes really doesn't gain a lot by taking this fight. So it's a risk for her, but I think that just shows how confident she is about winning this fight. So yeah, I'm going against the grain here. I'm taking Amanda Nunes. I think she wins either. I'm going to go decision, but would not shock me either if she gets the knockout because of that compromised weight cut there for Kayla Harrison. And I've also heard some people mention about Nunes cutting a lot of weight. That's true. And as you get older, obviously it's harder to cut weight, but I think Nunes has got enough notice. She sort of I think when did Kayla Harrison won the belt? She won it back in June of last year. So the seed's already been planted about Nunes fighting Kayla for a while. She's had more than enough time to get the weight down. I think it's going to be a good weight cut here for Amanda Nunes. So yeah, Amanda Nunes' decision is going to be my pick. So let me know in the comments which way you're leaning. Who are you picking in this fight? Let me know. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @LynchOnSports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.